What happens if you build a computer while it's snowing outside? Well, there's only one way to find out. Will we completely regret this by the end of the video? Time will tell. Hey everyone, I'm mryeester, your tech tinkerer, and today we are going to do something that seems pretty silly on paper. We are going to assemble a computer while it's snowing outside. Now, logically, we would think that when computer parts get wet and we try to turn it on, electricity can short and it can destroy the computer. But I woke up today to a winter wonderland and really just wanted to try this out in person. Will snow falling from the sky actually have enough conductive power to destroy a computer? Well, let's find out. So with that, let's go over all of the components that we'll be assembling in today's computer. We're going to be building an AMD computer, and so here I have a B450 motherboard. Inside of here, I also have my Ryzen chip, and today we're going to be using a Ryzen 5 1600. To pair with this, we're going to need some DDR4 memory, and so I have a single stick of Vengeance LPX 2666 megahertz RAM, 16 gigabytes, have some trusty thermal paste, and a nice cooler to go along with it. And for the graphics card, I'm going to be using a GTX 1050 Ti, so a bit older, but just in case the snow completely destroys everything, I want to make sure I can part ways with it. It's only been like 20 minutes out here, my hands are freezing. This is just his first time out in the snow, so he's really loving it. Oh, you're tangling my mic. He's a little overweight and he's really fluffy, so I think he likes the cold of it all. All right, so without any further ado, let's assemble this computer out in the snow. As you can see, snow is definitely starting to accumulate on these parts themselves. And the main question is, will the snow be enough to prevent it from working properly? I really hope you guys can see that it's snowing. So like any other normal build, let's start with our motherboard. It's always good practice to use the motherboard box itself to help prop up your motherboard, which is exactly what we'll do today. And then let's install our CPU. The orientation of the CPU in the motherboard, wow, my hands are numb. I can't even really feel this. The orientation that the CPU needs to go into the motherboard is dictated by these golden corners. You can see here the CPU has a golden corner on one of the corners, and the motherboard socket also has an indication of a single corner that's unique. And we want to line those up and it should fit in properly. Now to note, you shouldn't have to force CPUs into place. They should really just slide into the slot. And with that, we can install it like that. Up next, let's install our single stick of RAM in this case. You'll notice that even though we only have a single stick of RAM, there are 4 slots in the motherboard. And so which slot do we actually plug this into? Now the motherboard's manual will tell you this. I don't have it on me, so I'm just gonna guess this slot right here. And if we're wrong, we'll have to swap it out if it doesn't boot properly. So with the RAM, we're gonna align this little gap that's at the bottom of the RAM stick with the little bump that is in the slot. And if we do that properly, it should slide nicely into place. And then you just need to push it down with a bit of force. And just like that, we have our RAM installed. Up next, let's install our CPU cooler. But before we do that, let's apply some thermal paste. I'm not sure how much cooling we'll actually need given that we're outside in freezing temperatures, but it definitely can't hurt. And honestly, my hands are so numb, I can't even get the cap off of this. So 1 second. All right, there we go. So for thermal paste, I'm just going to put a little glob in the middle, and that should do just nicely. And as you can see at this point, the falling snow is beginning to melt all over the components. On the motherboard, for example, all of this standing water could act as conduits for electricity to jump around, which is known as a short. The job of the motherboard is to route energy from the power supply to all of these individual parts. So if electricity goes where it's not supposed to, it can actually damage a bunch of stuff. And so that's really what we're putting to the test today. Will all of this water that's melted from the falling snow be enough to destroy the computer or not? All right, so now let's install the cooler. This is an AMD Wraith Prism, and so it does have some RGB, and the installation process is fairly simple. Because we already have these brackets in place on our motherboard, we should just be able to push this down and hook on these supports. Perfect. That was hard with cold hands. And then we can just pull this lever to latch it down. And finally, can't forget to plug in the CPU fan header. And with that, our cooler is installed. The final step before plugging everything into power is installing our graphics card. In this case, we're not actually going to be installing an SSD or hard drive because we just want to see if this can boot into BIOS. And for that, we don't need any type of storage. So as you can probably tell, our GPU has seen better days. It is quite wet from all of the melted snow. But regardless, we're going to install it into our motherboard, which only has a single 16 PCIe slot. And so we'll simply line up the extruding pins, push it down, and it's installed. And now for the fun part. We're going to plug our power supply into each of these respective slots, power it on, and see what happens. For the power supply, I have this Thermaltake Smart 600, and this stuff over here is for the monitor that we're going to be using. The snow has been lightening up a bit, so it's not as torrential as it was a moment ago, but I think it still counts. Probably a good time to remind you again not to try this at home. I am perfectly okay if none of these parts ever work again, but this could be potentially dangerous and not worth risking your own parts. So with that, let's plug in motherboard power, GPU power, Deuce. What is that dog barking at? My hands are way too cold for this. Oh my goodness. And CPU power. And then finally, we need a monitor to output our display to in the event that it actually posts. And so I'm going to use our makeshift laptop monitor screen that we pulled and are not using as an external monitor. So for this, I just need to simply plug in the ribbon and need something to help prop it up. Perfect. Now let's grab a video cable to plug into our graphics card and our monitor, just like that. And now we need to plug everything into an outlet. For this step, I have an extension cord running from my house, so I'm gonna just go plug all this stuff into that. All right, folks, everything is installed properly. The power supply is plugged in everywhere. We have our monitor. The snow is still falling. It is time to power this guy on and see what happens. Is there any chance that this works, or will it just completely destroy every single component? At this point, I'm kind of leaning more towards the latter, but let's use our trusty screwdriver to short out our power pins and find out. Just gotta make sure our power supply is switched on, and then identify our front panel headers, which are right here. Determine which ones are for power, which are these two. When we do that, nothing happens. No signs of life whatsoever right now. If we look very closely, we can actually see some pulsing lights on the motherboard itself. It almost looks like it's going in and out of power. So it is currently trying to turn on, but there's likely some water getting in the way that is preventing it from going through its full power cycle. All right, so now we're gonna try again. Powering this on, back to just the flickering lights. Clearly it's trying to power on, but to no avail. So it turns out outside in the snow is not the best place to build a computer. So as a next step, let's take this inside, let it completely dry, and see if we can get it running at all.
Approximately 10 hours later.
Welcome to 12 hours in the future from that previous clip. Now that we've given these guys half a day to dry, they're looking like they're in much better shape. So let's reassemble this computer and see if we can get it to boot. If we can't get it to power on, that just means that the snow damage is too much for it to handle. But we won't go down without a fight. The motherboard's cardboard box got completely drenched and lost all of its integrity. So let's use thermal paste to prop up our motherboard this time around. Wonderful. CPU back into place. Not gonna add any more thermal paste, just gonna keep it how it is. 12 hours might actually not be enough for this to completely dry. If you ever happen to spill water on your personal computer, I would let it sit for at least an entire day, if not more. Plug the power supply back in, this, that, and this. And can't forget about our makeshift monitor. It might not look pretty, but it does the job. Function over form, as I like to say. Finally, plug the video cable into our GPU, and I think we are set. Even though these computer parts were cast into a snowstorm earlier today, let's see how much life they have left in them after being completely dried off. Well, mostly dried off. So now for the final test, let's power it on one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please. Oh, and we see some life. Look at that, it spins to life instantly. Slowly but surely, oh, we actually get it to boot. Look at that. All right, I'm not sure if you guys can actually see this screen, but it did boot. That's so exciting. Which means that this guy survived the snowstorm. That's super impressive to me and reiterates the resilience that computer parts have. This should give you a lot of confidence at home if you do happen to spill water on your computer. If you're able to immediately shut it off, there's always a chance that you'll be able to turn it back on without any issues. Man, I love it when things work out. And honestly, in different circumstances outside, this actually probably could have worked with snow falling on it. In this short form video, which I posted a little while ago, I did expose an older Dell computer to a snowstorm, and it did actually work as normal. The difference is for this computer, we assembled it piece by piece while snow was falling and melting all over it. Either way, I'm happy we at least got it running once everything dried off. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. I post daily short form tech tinkering content on my TikTok and YouTube shorts, as well as weekly longer form factor content just like this one here today. That's all I have for you guys, so I will catch you in the next one. I hope you all have a wonderful day. See you later.